Hi, good morning. It's Tuesday, August 20th, and this is another edition of our podcast, the Zogby Report, real and unscripted. It's been quite a while, but this is August, so between vacations and doctor's visits and all that sort of thing, we've had a little bit of a hiatus, but we're ready to jump right in, and of course, there's a lot going on. Welcome back from Albania. How are you? How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty well. I'm rested, relaxed, and I detoxed from the news, so
Yes.
I feel great.
Yeah, and I sort of did too, although I read about it. It's a whole lot different reading about it than it is, watching the video. But here we go. So we're going to update this presidential race, this wild and woolly race, and with the understanding we have about 75 days to go. And of course, anything can happen. This is one of those periods where whether I'm seeing a doctor or someone in the supermarket, folks come up to me and say, who's going to win? And I tell them I don't know. And so I don't. And there's no real basis for knowing who is going to win. As we've said over and over again, anything can happen. But here's the state of the race right now. We're in the very beginnings of the Democratic National Convention, and job number one for the nominee, Kamala Harris, and her running mate, Tim Walz, is party unity. And it looks like that's happening. I don't think they've sealed the deal 100% yet, but they've come close. And at least in terms of the visuals, with the president bowing out and passing the torch, with the leaders, Hillary Clinton and, the Obamas tonight and so on, the message will be clear. And that's a far different image and a far different Democratic Party than we had, say, 5 or 6 weeks ago. In numbers, the party's competitive. So in 5 of the last 6 polls that have been released nationally up to this minute, Kamala Harris leads. The leads aren't much, but some are as high as 5% nationwide and across the board, with the exception just really of one poll. She has experienced a honeymoon, and she's taken advantage of that honeymoon. She's going to have to face the press. She's going to have to face a real battering. But at least at this point in time, what has needed to happen has happened. Very importantly, let's look at the battleground states. And what we see there is, even though it was competitive between Biden and Trump, there's some momentum. It's still close. Donald Trump still leads in a couple of those states. But importantly, Kamala Harris is showing signs of leading in Michigan and leading in Wisconsin, 2 states that she must win, but also pulling into the lead in Arizona and being a whole lot more competitive in Georgia, North Carolina. That means that the Southern Rim versus the Blue Wall strategy that Democrats were talking about before Biden dropped out may no longer be operative. This may be a competitive battleground situation. My final point is that the Electoral College, if you look at the aggregators, the Real Clear Politics, the 538s of the world, if they look at all the states and all the electoral votes and are forced on the basis of averages in each of those states to project a winner on the basis of the polling right now, they give Donald Trump 287 electoral votes. You need 270 to win. And Kamala Harris, 251 electoral votes. However, there's always a however. If you just look at Pennsylvania with 19 and Arizona with 11, and you see that the average of recent polls has Trump leading by 1. So 1/10%. And if you take those 30 electoral votes out of the Trump camp, put them into Kamala Harris's camp, it becomes then Kamala Harris 281 and Donald Trump 257. That's the testimonial to what we're going to be facing, among other things, between now and November 5th. This is a very competitive, very close race right now. How do you see it?
I see it the same way. On the electoral map, assuming that deep blue states and blue-leaning states go to the Democrats, and assuming that deep red states and red-leaning states go to the Republicans, leaves you with the northern rim and the southern rim. At this moment now, North Carolina appears to be back in play as a battleground state, and so that is included in the southern rim, going from North Carolina down to Georgia, to Arizona, to Nevada, and then in the north, at the moment, it looks like Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. So assuming that deep blue and blue leaning go Democrat, deep red and red leaning go Republican, Kamala would need to sweep all three of the northern rim, and I think just one of the southern. As you mentioned in the polls, if you go back at the polls, especially zeroing in on the battleground state polls over the last week, it's basically, I would say, 9 of 10 of them are showing Harris ahead by anywhere from 2 to 3. There is an outlier with 1 or 2 showing her ahead by 4 or 5. But we're in late August, okay? Mm-hmm. And America is not Switzerland, Switzerland is a country where really the only diversity, large-scale diversity, is the fact that in some parts they speak French, in some parts they speak German, and in some parts they speak Italian. But, Swiss people, by and large, look very similar, of the same stock. America is dynamic in every way, culturally, economically, politically, and especially politically. And in a dynamic country, the polling is most definitely going to shift. So what we see now in the battleground states, or even nationally, with, let's just say, Kamala ahead on average anywhere from 2 to 3 percentage points, can and is very likely to shift in a matter of weeks and to go back and forth. There will be movement. I'm certain of that. What drives that? What are the mechanics of that, other than just broadly saying we're a dynamic country? There's a lot that goes into that pushes that dynamic. We can begin with the Kamala honeymoon and the Kamala high energy. There is a high right now. You just cannot escape it. You see it everywhere. People are very excited. Democrats are very excited. They've got a young woman of color. All of a sudden, it's kind of interesting to see Kamala go from, she wasn't really praised months ago. She wasn't really saw as somebody who was a major competitive candidate, but now she is. Here she is, and there's a high, and there's the sense of both high energy and impending doom. If you watch the DNC last night, if Donald Trump is elected, we will fall into a dictatorship. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. So that high is definitely going to play out on the Republican side. I understand that Trump in the media is being projected as on the downfall. He's not the same. He's low energy. He's saying crazy things. But MAGA voters believe that Kamala Harris is a communist. Democrat voters believe that Trump is a fascist. I actually think that they both happen to be right. With that impending sense of doom, you're going to create a loop of a competitive race. What it's all going to come down to is the undecided. And if you look at every poll, the battleground state polls and the national polls, there are still anywhere from 7 to 8% who are undecided. They are going to shift. The independents, more specifically, the independents who equally vote Democrat and Republican, are going to shift. And what's going to shift that is this energy of back and forth fighting, this back and forth sense of impending doom if one or the other wins. Also, another dynamic at play are going to be issues. Right now, it seems to be, and from my vantage point, what's media driven are the personalities. Kamala and her personality is shining. Donald Trump and his being personified as much more dark and dictatorial. But then it's going to get into the issues. And of course, between now and November, I do think there will be earthquakes, political earthquakes. What we just saw over the last month, of course, forget about the attempted assassination. I'm talking about what's happening in the Middle East. I'm talking about what's happening in Ukraine. And don't forget about Taiwan and China. That's on the geopolitical front. Don't forget that last week, the world reverberated when the Bank of Japan and the global stock market had a 24-hour meltdown. A lot of analysts are saying that's not going to go away. You know, you could have some serious economic reverberations. Of course, there's all kinds of issues like crime, the border. And so these things are going to start coming back into play and not as much just the personalities of the candidates. And that's going to have an impact on the polls. And then the last thing I'll say is when we get to late October and we're talking national elections, there's always one particular thing on my mind, and that's October surprises are around the corner. And so actually, I think we'll be seeing September surprises. We may even see late August surprises. But you can imagine the opposition researchers, well, they've already unleashed on Donald Trump, but you can imagine the Republican operatives are at work digging into Kamala's personal life, talking to every person that she's ever, worked with, went to school with, dated, whatever. And these operatives are digging and digging and digging into the personal lives. There more than likely will be videos that surface. There will be stories that surface. These things can move the needle. They did in 2016 with the WikiLeaks. They did in 2012 when the recording of Mitt Romney surfaced about him talking about the 47% that he'll never get. And October surprises do have that impact. So be on the lookout for all these changes and for the polls to change as a result.
And to just build on that, what I think makes it particularly volatile and scary is that the sources of that kind of opposition research may not even be human and may be artificially generated. And I don't want to go down that road today.
Well, actually, I want to go down that, but then I want to take a sharp right turn, because that, as I was saying that was on my mind. And I have been talking about that over the past several weeks, that I do think, and maybe now listeners, I'm sure some listeners were agreeing with me, but maybe now more listeners are agreeing with me. I do see the convergence of AI and the election, and it's being talked about more in the news. And yes, some kind of deep fake, some kind of massive, many deep fakes. So,
just to round it out on my end, for starters, a cautionary note on reading the polls. And that is just because a race is competitive does not mean that it's going to be 1 point this way, 1 point that way between now and election day. Having done daily tracking for Reuters and in the Washington Times, in a number of races, I'm thinking especially 2000, 2004, 2008, 2012, you actually can see swings of up to 4, 5, even 6 points both ways, a pendulum swinging as you measure this day by day. The race is very sensitive to external factors, to mistakes. And so, moving forward, we have Kamala Harris as of this moment with as much, say, as a 5-point lead in some of the polls. That could easily dissipate, and not from Tuesday to Wednesday. That could dissipate from Tuesday to Wednesday to Thursday to Friday over the course of days to Trump leading by 3 or 4 or 5 points. So be cautious. That still makes it a competitive race. Even though a lot of voters are locked in, there is still some fluidity, some fungibility here among independents, among moderates, among those who either are not paying attention or happen to be hypersensitive to external factors that they see or hear about. The other thing that I want to mention is that exactly a week from today, August 27th, I have my book coming out. And it's a book about how to read polls. It's called Beyond the Horse Race, How to Read Polls and Why We Should. It's available for pre-order right now on Amazon, where there's a detailed description. It'll be on our website as well. You and I will be talking about it over the next couple of podcasts as we, take some of the lessons from the book and apply them to the current race. But I did want to mention that Beyond the Horse Race. Why don't you close for us?
I'm going to close by saying that's a wrap. I think we covered everything. We want people to understand, to be cautionary, to not get ahead of themselves and thinking that just because the polls show the snapshot today, that's going to reflect 2.5 months from now. Remember, we live in a very, very dynamic, politically dynamic country.
We do. Okay, that's it for now. It's good to be back, and we'll see you actually shortly, talking about what everybody's talking about. Take care.
Let's do it again. Yep. Take care.
Bye-bye.